Location sharing started out as a safety tool, but somewhere along the line it turned into something more of a social test. Teenagers started sharing their locations with friends on Snapchat and Instagram. Romantic partners did it too. One survey even found that 20% of adults think that a partner who won't share their location is a deal breaker. But how did we get to this point? Because if you told me 20 years ago that all of my family and half of my friends would know my exact location at every moment, I would have been absolutely horrified. I recently put those questions to Thomas Germain. He's co-host of the BBC podcast The Interface and author of the weekly column Keeping Tabs.
I mean, the only way we could go farther than this is like if you were keeping a diary and sharing your thoughts. It can't be a mistake that there's this social pressure built in that when you turn off location sharing, the other person gets a notification. Katty stopped sharing her location with me. Now I'm like, well, what happened? Like, did her feelings change? Like, what was it? The thing with all of these technologies is we're living through a natural experiment where we will find out what the consequences are. But at that point, it's baked into our lives and it's too late.
Are we at risk of conflating visibility with trust? I mean, you can see all of the kind of intimate details of where somebody is. It doesn't actually necessarily mean you're that much closer to them.
No.
And you now have a whole bunch of teenagers and young adults who treat it as if it was like likes on social media, that if you don't like me, you're not my friend. If you don't like me, you're not, close to me enough. So when did you see that shift happening?
Yeah, there's definitely been a really interesting change here. Apple introduced location sharing, I think it was about 15 years ago. But I would say over the past 10 years, and especially in the last 5, there's been this change. In families now, very common for everyone to have their location on, but also in like friend groups, I've seen this a lot, where the fact that you're sharing your location with someone is a sign that you've reached some level of intimacy. Or in romantic relationships, that sharing a location is like a sign of trust, a sign that you've got nothing to hide, that you're on the same page and you can always be in touch with each other. But it's also created all of these weird pressures, both because some people don't want to share their location and people often don't realize what it is they're revealing when they give this information away. But saying no, or even worse, revoking it once you've given it to another person, can create kind of a conflict in some cases that makes this like an issue of peer pressure that can be really difficult to navigate.
You're so right in romantic relationships. I was stunned when I saw this stat that showed me that for 21% of people in romantic relationships, not sharing their location is a deal breaker. It's like the kind of tech equivalent. It's your like phone equivalent of a prenup.
Right.
I don't know where that came from and what it does to a relationship, but I'm going to be honest, I find it slightly creepy.
Yeah, I mean, I try to not pass judgment about this sort of thing.
You're a better man than me.
I've been, I try. I'm not saying I succeed. But, I've been writing about privacy for almost 10 years now, and I find this pretty alarming. On the one hand, maybe it's like, oh, well, it's a sign that me and my partner, we trust each other and everything's fine and we don't have anything to worry about.
That's the question, is that you need the sign. You need the proof.
You need the sign. You need the proof. I think for some people, not giving that level of information is a sign that you're hiding something, which is pretty shocking when we think about just how intimate and how much information you're sharing with another person. This is where I am at all times. So like there's no moment of your life that's just for you. They need constant 24/7 access to you. And I think that's kind of a problem.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to play psychologist.
Okay, I can't wait.
And having sounded a little judgy about this, I have 4 kids. Of the 4 of them, 3 of them I share, and I love seeing where they are. One of them, my daughter Maya, who's 29, always said, I find this kind of creepy. Even my boyfriend, who I've been living with for 10 years, he doesn't share. I don't really want you to know where I am at all times. And so I have a sort of control sample, which is that it never occurs to me to even look or wonder where Maya is. I don't even have that. It's almost like knowing that I can look feeds a sort of addiction that I have now developed. Are the companies, as well as it being great business sense, are they giving us something that we need, or did they make this happen? I mean, are they tapping into some need of ours that was already there, or have they created this need in us? Dr. Thomas.
As a licensed psychologist, no, of course I did, but that's a really interesting question. I think of it less as a need that's being fulfilled and more of it's something that's playing into a natural human desire. Once these tools are available, it creates a new opportunity to worry. And because it's there, because you can check it, I think addiction is a useful framework. I don't know if this kind of thing is literally addictive, but the fact that you can check makes you want to do it. The fact that it's always there, that you can always feed that itch, like, ooh, do I need to be worried about my daughter? Well, I'll just check where she is. There was no opportunity to do that in the past. So that anxiety maybe wouldn't have developed there. So I think it creates maybe more problems than it's solving. I'm sure it's comforting for some people.
And maybe slightly sort of infantilizing as well. I mean, I think of how when I grew up, I traveled all over the world without my parents having any idea where I was in a crinkly little airmail letter.
And you turned out fine.
Well, ish.
More or less.
Ish.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just kind of throw this forward before we close. 20 years ago, the idea to you that you would have been tracked every minute by your family or by your friends would have seemed anathema. It was just kind of unthinkable, and you might have been a bit appalled even at the idea of it. You watch technology, Thomas, very closely. You follow all of this. Where do you see this going in the tea leaves? What else is there that's emerging in terms of tech features that today would seem weird, which in 10 years' time may be totally normalized in terms of how we interact with other people?
Well, there's a factor that I think people don't consider that makes this sort of thing very difficult to predict, and that is that so much of it is based on not just what's normal, but what's cool, right? If we think about the history of social media, for example, when I was in high school, everyone was on MySpace. It was a particular kind of interacting. That is dead. It used to be that everyone was watching cable. It was impossible to imagine that would go away. I think you can look at a lot of this stuff as generational trends. There could be shifts in the, public sentiment about what's normal and what we want that people do, that just this becomes icky, or it becomes lame, or it's like, oh, you're sharing a location. That's what my grandma did. Come on, who does that? But I think the one thing that I'm paying the most attention to, and this is, I think, different in a lot of ways. There's been a lot of discussion about the ways that technology has made our lives frictionless. You can get food delivered without talking to a human being. You don't have to go to the grocery store anymore. You don't need to you don't have to buy toilet paper. They'll bring it to you. If you want to look something up, it takes no effort. But I think that that lack of friction is starting to bleed into our social relationships and raise the expectation of how much attention you're expected to give somebody. It could reach a breaking point where it's too much and people get tired of this and they go, I'm done. I'm not sharing my location. I'm not responding to your text. Or it could become an expectation and we'll all just start doing this so we're not the weird one in the friend group that doesn't share our location. It's hard to predict where things are going to go, but there's a lot of, easy problems you can spot from a distance.
Thomas, Germain, thank you very much. That was super.
Thanks for having me on.